those of you who don't, first of all, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nick's niece. We've been on this ride together for a while now, and there's no way I was coming up here without my paper, so props to you guys for doing that because I needed this written down. The English dictionary defines alcoholism as addiction to the consumption of alcoholic liquor or the mental illness and compulsive behavior resulting from alcohol dependency. If you would have asked me the definition of alcoholism at 10 years old, I would have had a much different answer. If you would have asked me the definition of alcoholism at 10 years old, I would have told you that it was the monster from under the bed that came out and stole my uncle from me and completely altered the way I viewed the world. From the minute I was born, Nick was my best friend. The majority of my happy memories as a young child revolve around Nick taking me to the beach, picking me up from school, and teaching me the right gum to Slurpee ratio to get it just frozen enough. Even though he was older than I was, and it probably wasn't very cool to cart a kid around everywhere, he never failed to make me feel seen, included, and loved. Growing up, it never occurred to me that this wouldn't always be the only way I perceived my uncle. While figuring out what I wanted to say in this speech, I continued to feel stuck for weeks. I knew I had all of the words I wanted to say, but for some reason, every time I wrote something down or typed a new sentence, it was quickly followed up by an eraser or the delete button. This is my story, I lived it, so I couldn't wrap my head around why I wasn't able to say what I knew I wanted to. It wasn't until a therapy session a few weeks back where I was talking about the purpose of the speech and why it was so important to me that I finally grasped what was holding me back. The reason I wanted to be up here doing this tonight was to show the importance of communication and honesty with children, even when it is hard and you aren't quite sure what to say to them. I was editing my words to make this speech as light and easy as possible to protect others from scary and uncomfortable feelings. The exact thing that caused me so much confusion and anger as a child. I wanted to do this for her, the 10-year-old little girl who thought that it was her responsibility to fix her family. I wanted to do this so that maybe just one person could reevaluate the way that they choose to communicate with and include children in the difficult realities of addiction and the hardships of life in general. Bear with me, I've got a lot to say. The summer going into my 5th grade year was the first time I really got a glimpse into Nick's addiction. There was more fighting between Nick and family, things always felt tense, and then Nick was extremely sick. I don't remember where I was or how I was told that Nick was in the hospital, but I remember the big words that I heard. Things like pancreatitis, worst case we've ever seen, and shouldn't be alive. Visiting Nick in the hospital and seeing him so sick was the first time I ever felt angry with him. The first time I ever felt like he was lying to me. I didn't understand why he couldn't just tell me something was wrong. During the time that Nick was in the hospital, I slept with a picture of him next to my bed every night and listened to the song I Won't Give Up by Jason Mraz daily, praying to anything and anyone who was listening that he would be okay. At 10 years old, there was truly nothing going to stop me from getting my best friend back, and there was no way I would ever give up on him. It wasn't long after Nick got out of the hospital that he went to rehab for the first time and I started 5th grade. I was heartbroken saying goodbye to him. For as long as I had been alive, Nick had been by my side, but everybody told me this was going to help him and he would come back better, so I knew that it was my turn to be by his side and let him get the help that he needed. When he came back, I was certain life would go back to normal, and this would be something I would hardly remember 10 years down the road. Unfortunately, I didn't know it then, but that summer would be the start of a long journey of hope, anxiety, anger, hate, and confusion that would stem from loving my uncle, the alcoholic. When Nick came back, there was a common theme that carried on through the following years of his battle with alcoholism. Things were great until they weren't. He was sober until he wasn't. Our family was hopeful until we were devastated. At every family dinner on Sunday afternoon, I sat at the table with the adults while they talked about how he was doing. They knew I was mature enough to hear what was happening, but I don't think it ever occurred to them that I was really paying attention or understanding the gravity of what they were talking about. I understood everything they were saying, and when I didn't understand, I made sure to memorize every word so that I was able to go home and look it up. Most of the time, the conversations I heard between adults were very light and often mentioned how well Nick was doing, or how hopeful they were that this next time he got sober it would finally stick.
You swear.
Although nothing I was hearing was really that concerning, something always felt off. If Nick was doing so well, why isn't he here? If he's sober right now, why isn't he come around? If things are really going so great, why is everybody always whispering around me? Feeling like I was being left out, I started trying to find information anywhere I could. I often listened behind my door when I was supposed to go to bed and searched my mom's phone and computer when I said I was playing games or nobody was home. I found out information I should have never known at 10, 11, or 12 years old, but I felt helpless and left out. I felt like I was being lied to and I didn't have another choice. So for years I continued to do it so that I could feel somewhat included in what was happening with Nick's life. By the time I was 14, I had mastered searching Nick's apartment looking for clues that he had been drinking. I could instantly tell if he was drinking when I saw him before most adults in my life could. I had perfected acting oblivious to knowing something was wrong with Nick so that he wouldn't get upset. And the cycle that started the first time he came back from rehab had become second nature to me. By the time I was 14, I began having panic attacks if Nick walked into the same room as me unexpectedly. By the time I was 14, I had picked my uncle up off of the side of a McDonald's, drunk and passed out, while my grandfather and I physically had to lift him and carry him into the car so that the cops didn't. By the time I was 14, I knew that it was frowned upon in our family to talk about Nick in anything other than a positive light, so I kept my questions, anger, and anxieties to myself. By the time I was 14, I had lost all hope that I was ever getting my best friend back, and I had let go of our relationship for the sake of my own emotional well-being. The one thing I was so sure of when I started this journey was that I would never give up on my uncle, but at the age of 14, it was the only thing protecting my heart. From 14 on, I kept as much distance between Nick and myself as humanly possible. Being around him when he was good hurt too bad because I knew it was bound to come crashing down. I saw him when I had to, I hugged him when I had to, I acted like everything was normal when I had to, and that was it. I knew I loved my uncle, but I also really hated him. I hated what he was doing to my family. I hated that my mom was sad all the time. I hated that I felt like he took a part of my childhood from me. I hated that I hated him. Nobody tells you how to become the family member of an addict, especially not at 10 years old. There's no guidebook, no rules to look back on. I often got lost in the chaos of addiction, with the adults surrounding me having to focus on how to save Nick's life. It's easy to lose a child in the mix when they are showing no signs of struggle. I maintained perfect grades, I was respectful, I didn't act out. There was seemingly no reason to worry about me. What they didn't see was the internal battle that I was fighting while I grieved the loss of someone who was still alive. While my parents went to bed and had each other to lean on after a hard day, I went to sleep by myself, terrified and uneasy of what phone call we might be receiving that night. One person may be an addict, but the entire family is suffering. It is so important that the children who are involved are aware and included in any way that is appropriate for them so that they have some sense of security. Children are so much smarter and observant than adults give them credit for. Without open communication, their minds wander and they attempt to find out information for themselves. I know this because I was the little girl with a broken heart and a wandering mind. Include them. Invite them to ask questions and check in on them, even if they aren't showing any signs of distress. They need your honesty, communication, and support more than anything. Okay, that's the end of my speech, but there's 3 people that I really felt that I needed to address tonight. Mom, bear with me, this is gonna be tough. I'm sure that in some way you feel some sense of responsibility for the things that I heard, saw, and experienced. But I don't blame you for anything that happened while we figured out how to navigate this new life together. You were experiencing everything for the first time too. You were losing your brother, and I'm sorry that I wasn't always able to be gentle with your heart when mine was so full of anger. I love you the most. Chris, thank you for being my light in a time of complete darkness. You protected my heart more times than I know. You were the only person who ever answered my questions with complete honesty, even when it hurt you. And you saved my uncle's life for us, even when it was killing you inside. I will never be able to thank you enough. Nick. When I was 20 years old, I wrote you a letter that for me determined the state of our relationship for good. A letter that got me here doing this tonight. I thought I would be at your funeral before I was ever speaking at your event promoting recovery. The last 12 years have been nothing short of hell, but the last 4 of them have been so inspiring for me to watch unfold. I cannot even begin to imagine what it was like for you in the internal battle you were fighting. I tell everybody that I am the most proud of you, but I don't necessarily think that is true. There's one woman who would do anything to be here tonight if it were possible, and it would be wrong of me to stand up here and not to mention your mom. None of this is possible without her. And I'm so incredibly sorry that she's not physically here to see and experience what you are doing for this community. She is the most proud of the beautiful work you are doing, and I know she has the biggest smile on her face every day, knowing that her son is not only alive to tell his story, but helping others and thriving because of it. Your strength and your story inspires me daily. I love you.